Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. My name is V. Ravi Kumar and with me is my Hindi co-anchor Nikhil Shukla.
नमस्कार, आप सभी का मार्केट मंत्र में बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। रोज की तरह हम आज भी देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक तथा शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार आपके लिए लेकर आए हैं। उन पर हम चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए कार्यक्रम में आमंत्रित हैं आर्थिक विश्लेषक जयंता दास। जयंता जी नमस्कार, कार्यक्रम में आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। नमस्कार। और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ में है रवि।
Government approves National Green Hydrogen Mission with an initial outlay of 19,744 crore rupees. Domestic share indices log losses of more than 1%. Sensex finishes below the 60,700 level. Nifty settles below the 18,550 mark. Gold climbs to trade around 56,000 rupees per 10 grams for February contracts at MCX, and Brent crude plunges more than 3%.
सरकार ने 19,744 करोड़ रुपए की शुरुआती लागत से राष्ट्रीय हरित हाइड्रोजन मिशन को स्वीकृति दी। घरेलू शेयर बाजार में 1% से अधिक की गिरावट। सेंसेक्स 60,700 के नीचे और निफ्टी 18,050 अंक के स्तर से नीचे आकर बंद हुआ। मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में फरवरी के वायदा कारोबार में सोना 56,000 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम के आसपास और ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल की कीमतों में 3% की गिरावट।
The Union Government has approved the National Green Hydrogen Mission with an initial outlay of 19,744 crore rupees. Briefing reporters in New Delhi, Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur said the mission aims to make India a global hub for production, utilization and export of green hydrogen. He said this mission will play an important role in dealing with climate change. He said India will be the global hub of green hydrogen. Mr. Thakur said Prime Minister Narendra Modi had announced the launch of National Hydrogen Mission during his Independence Day speech on the 15th of August 2021. He said 50 lakh tons of green hydrogen will be produced per year with an associated renewable energy capacity addition of about 125 gigawatts. The targets by 2030 are likely to bring in over 8 lakh crore rupees investments and create over 6 lakh jobs. The minister said annually the mission will help save 1 lakh crore rupees in the import of fossil fuels. Mr. Thakur said through this mission 50 million metric tons of carbon emissions will be averted annually. Janto, what would you say about this? Hitherto we have been talking in terms of renewable, in terms of solar.
Yeah.
And we are now talking of green hydrogen. How important is this?
Well, obviously it was something which was coming in the offing ever since the Prime Minister has announced a project. And I think it's one of the major moves which the Government of India has made in terms of focusing on a national hydrogen policy also at the same time under the National Green Hydrogen Mission. What's important to understand are two things. One is our commitment to the 2030 Earth goals which has been made in various conferences. And secondly, further to the commitments to find not only just electric as an important renewable energy or as a replacement for fossil energy, but also to find out other renewable energy sources. Now, the government has been consistently telling that it's a major bet to understand that hydrogen would play a critical role in creating this particular alternative energy source, and based on that, obviously the investment commitment is the amount of jobs to be generated from this particular commitment. But most of it, the important icing on the cake is the amount of emissions which is going to get reduced by a focused replacement. Let me also tell you, the government has also been interacting with auto manufacturers also at the same time, because they have also been producing and focusing on Toyota. I think is one of the first one to come in with the hydrogen gas emitter service vehicle. So that's going to happen, and that's going to happen very soon. And I strongly believe diesel passenger cars would be almost obsolete now, I think in another 24 months in terms of production. They will soon be replaced by not only EVs, which is fast taking space in this EV space at this point of time, but also through all this hydrogen, fuel cars and things like that. So that's another big thing which India is looking forward to.
जयंता, सरकार ये भी कोशिश कर रही है कि देश में हाइड्रोजन से चलने वाली ट्रेन चलाई जाए और इसकी शुरुआत भी की जा चुकी है। कोशिशें जारी हैं, प्रयास किए जा रहे हैं, एक्सपेरिमेंट किए जा रहे हैं और सरकार जो इस दिशा में आगे बढ़ रही है, आपको क्या लगता है कि हाइड्रोजन से जब देश में रेल चलेगी तो उसका क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ेगा इकोनॉमी पर?
देखिए, इम्पैक्ट तो लॉन्ग टर्म बहुत अच्छा है इन टर्म्स ऑफ नॉट ओनली फ्यूल सेविंग बट ऑल्सो इन टर्म्स ऑफ एमिशन। जैसे मैंने थोड़ी देर पहले कहा, 2030 का जो हमने अलग से कमिट किया है एमिशन लेवल्स को कंट्रोल करने के लिए। इलेक्ट्रिसिटी इन इंडिया अनफॉर्चुनेटली अभी भी करीबन 60% इलेक्ट्रिसिटी फॉसिल फ्यूल द्वारा प्रोड्यूस होते हैं। तो अगर आप कंप्लीट ईवी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में भी शिफ्ट करें तो कहीं ना कहीं इनडायरेक्ट रूट में फाइनली इट इज फॉसिल फ्यूल्स बीइंग यूज्ड टू प्रोड्यूस दैट इलेक्ट्रिसिटी। हाइड्रोजन का केस में इट इज एक्चुअली रिप्लेसेबल मॉडल जो मैं मानता हूं। और जैसे आपने सही कहा कि आज का तारीख में ऑलमोस्ट एवरीवेयर इलेक्ट्रिफिकेशन होके रखा है, कहीं पे स्टीम इंजन या डीजल कहीं पे अभी भी शायद कुछ जगह में शायद चल रहा है। मेरे को उतना आंकड़े का रूप से पता नहीं है, लेकिन हाइड्रोजन एज अ रिप्लेसमेंट फ्यूल अगर देश का इंडियन रेलवेज में भी अगर वो अडॉप्ट किया जाता है तो इट विल बी अ ह्यूज स्टेप फॉरवर्ड। और जैसे मैंने कहा कि पैसेंजर व्हीकल्स का तरफ से ऑलरेडी ये स्टेप लिया गया है गवर्नमेंट का तरफ से, बड़े बड़े कंपनी सरकार का साथ मिलके हाइड्रोजन फ्यूल कार्स का ऊपर फोकस कर रहे हैं। और मैं मानता हूं कि ईवी के साथ साथ हाइड्रोजन फ्यूल व्हीकल्स भी इज अनदर रेवोल्यूशन टू कम इन द नेक्स्ट 2 to 3 years, जहां पे लोग पहले से भी कह रहे हैं। जैसे अगर आप पेट्रोल पंप में जब आप जाते हैं, आपको वहां पे 2 तरह का पेट्रोल मिलता है, 2 तरह का डीजल मिलता है, तो साथ में आपको हाइड्रोजन का भी एक ऑप्शन पेट्रोल पंप में मौजूदा किया जाएगा। तो यानी कि वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ऑलरेडी रेडी है जी। आपको नया हाइड्रोजन स्टेशन बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है, एक सिर्फ अलग से एक आपको हाइड्रोजन देने के जो भी
एक सेगमेंट मान सकते हैं, एक सेगमेंट
वो क्रिएट करना पड़ेगा। दूसरा है वाहन। अब ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री पूरी तरह से तैयार है और वो भी बोल रहे हैं कि अगले 2-3 साल के अंदर हाइड्रोजन फ्यूल वाहन वो लोग प्रोड्यूस शुरू करेंगे, उत्पादन शुरू करेंगे। तो उसमें ये होगा कि 2025-2030 तक शायद जब आप अपना गाड़ी लेके जाए, जिनके पास पेट्रोल का गाड़ी है वो पेट्रोल भरेंगे और जिनके पास हाइड्रोजन फ्यूल कार है उसी पेट्रोल पंप से हाइड्रोजन फ्यूल भी भरेंगे। तो ईवी का जो इस वक्त जो थोड़ा बहुत चैलेंज माना जा रहा है कि ईवी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर क्रिएट करना, ईवी स्टेशंस लगाना, तो वो उतना बड़ा चैलेंज शायद हाइड्रोजन के लिए ना हो।
इसमें एक चीज और मैं जोड़ना चाहूंगा, आजकल हम ये सुनते हैं कि बहुत सारे रेलवे स्टेशन के ऊपर सोलर पैनल स्थापित किए गए हैं, पूरा रेलवे स्टेशन सोलर इलेक्ट्रिसिटी से चल रहा है और साथ में अब ये भी हम जोड़ रहे हैं कि हाइड्रोजन से ट्रेन भी चलेगी।
रेलवे स्टेशन क्यों हम सोलर पावर की बात करें, आप हमारे एयरपोर्ट देखिए जी, काफी एयरपोर्ट्स में भी ऑलमोस्ट आई थिंक दिल्ली एयरपोर्ट में भी ऑलमोस्ट मेजर जनरेशन थ्रू सोलर पावर एनर्जी हो रहा है इस वक्त। तो ये सारे चीजें जैसे मैंने कहा फाइनली जाके कन्वर्ज करता है 2030 तक भारत ने जो कमिटमेंट किया उस कमिटमेंट के ऊपर कि एमिशन कहां तक वो कंट्रोल करना चाहते हैं और वो सस्टेनेबल गोल होना चाहिए।
Renewable energy in terms of there are a lot of things happening parallelly. There's hydrogen and then there's solar, there's wind, and of course there is ethanol blended with oils that we're already using. So there are so many things in EV as you mentioned. Which one of this do you think would take the lead in the times to come in the shorter term, 4 to 5 years? And two, would this have any impact on our budgetary resources, because we have what is called as imported inflation.
Yeah.
So a lot of our deficit is contributed by importing oil
absolutely,
from...
Absolutely.
So in the shorter term, that is 4 to 5 years, which of these strategies would probably have the greatest impact?
It all depends in terms of the commitment in infrastructure, which, not only the government, but also the private body who will be involved in this as a stakeholder. In this case, it could be, people who are setting up EV stations. It could be people who are manufacturing automobile, 4-wheelers and 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers or even trucks. So, to answer your question straight away, I guess there would be a tough competition between EV and hydrogen at the top. If I consider, a vision 2030 of what we see from here. Diesel would obviously be absolute to a great extent obsolete. So, I mean, almost all car manufacturing companies have stopped producing diesel passenger vehicles, including Toyota, which was a leader in the market segment in diesel passenger vehicles. So, taking a cue from there, I look forward. And let me also tell you, even the government is quite upbeat and gung-ho on hydrogen to lead the whole revolution, in addition to EV, So I believe, and as I said a short while ago, the infrastructure for hydrogen, providing hydrogen to the cars will be much more easier option than EV at this point of time. Because in the petrol pump, you just need to set up a just another booth to dispose of hydrogen fuel.
And EV anyway is dependent on electricity, and during the pandemic we saw everybody going back to coal for generating electricity.
Absolutely.
There's a huge move back to coal.
Absolutely. So and in India around 60%, as I said, is fossil based production. So electricity in that way, shifting to electricity, while it may look cleaner on the top, the production is still challenged, because it's still basically we don't have a nuclear power or a hydropower or a solar powered energy focusing on us. We have a coal based powered energy. So that once again comes back to emission issues and things.
And is nuclear completely out now? Everybody.
Let's see. I mean, at this point of time, obviously, given its costs and given how it peters out. Even if you see wind power. Now, wind power as a revolution started almost 20 years ago in India. Led by Suzlon, which is one of the leaders of wind power energy in India. But that for some reason is unable to keep up the momentum to spread out in a distributed manner. Not that we are dismissing wind power as an option. Obviously, the government is still trying. But the hopes which were initially sustained on where wind power can take us, that has not happened. Similarly, hydropower, as you said, is limited to the hills, to northeast. I think you also have a story on hydropower, another dam being built in Himachal, a later part of the news today. But hydropower energy is also limited to challenging geographical areas as well as high costs.
और आगे की खबरों पर बढ़ते हैं तो सरकार ने हिमाचल प्रदेश में 382 मेगावाट क्षमता वाली सुन्नी बांध जल विद्युत परियोजना में निवेश को मंजूरी दे दी है। सूचना और प्रसारण मंत्री अनुराग सिंह ठाकुर ने आज नई दिल्ली में पत्रकारों को बताया कि 2614 करोड़ रुपए की अनुमानित लागत वाली ये परियोजना सतलज नदी पर बनाई जाएगी। उन्होंने बताया कि सतलज जल विद्युत लिमिटेड अगले 5 वर्ष में इस बांध का निर्माण करेगी। परियोजना से 4000 लोगों को प्रत्यक्ष और अप्रत्यक्ष रूप से रोजगार मिलेगा।
The government has approved Central Sector Broadcasting Infrastructure and Network Development BIND scheme with an outlay of over 2,539 crore rupees up to 2025-2026. Briefing reporters in New Delhi, Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Singh Thakur said the scheme will financially support Prasar Bharati in the expansion and upgradation of its broadcasting infrastructure, content development and civil works. He said the scheme will widen the reach in left-wing extremism, border and strategic areas.
जल शक्ति मंत्रालय मध्य प्रदेश के भोपाल में राज्य मंत्रियों के पहले अखिल भारतीय सम्मेलन का आयोजन कर रहा है। 5 और 6 जनवरी को होने वाले इस सम्मेलन का शीर्षक है वर्ष 2047 के लिए जल दृष्टिकोण। सम्मेलन का उद्देश्य वर्ष 2047 के लिए जल दृष्टिकोण के वास्ते विचार आमंत्रित करना है। और अब शेयर बाजार पर नजर डालें तो घरेलू कारोबार में आज सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी दोनों ही 1% से अधिक की गिरावट के साथ बंद हुए। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 60,700 से नीचे आकर बंद हुआ और कारोबार की समाप्ति पर निफ्टी 18,050 के स्तर से नीचे आ गया। वैश्विक शेयर बाजार के मिले जुले रुख के चलते घरेलू कारोबार में ये सुस्ती देखी गई। सेंसेक्स 633 अंक लुढ़ककर 60,657 पर बंद हुआ, जबकि निफ्टी 190 अंकों की गिरावट के साथ 18,043 पर बंद हुआ। विस्तृत बाजार की बात करें तो बीएसई मिड कैप सूचकांक 0.97% की सुस्ती में रहा और स्मॉल कैप सूचकांक 0.79% नीचे आ गया।
The Sensex and the NSE Nifty today logged losses of more than 1%. Index of top 30 companies at Bombay Stock Exchange Sensex ended below 60,700 points. The Nifty index of top 50 companies at the National Stock Exchange closed below the 18,050 level. Both indices fell amid mixed cues from global share markets. The Sensex fell 637 points to settle at 60,657. The Nifty also slipped 190 points to finish at 18,043. In the broader market, at the BSE, the mid-cap index declined 0.97%, while the small-cap index ended 0.79% down. In the Sensex pack, 3 companies posted gains, while 27 logged losses. Maruti was the top gainer as it added 0.4%, followed by Ultratech, Cement and TCS both gained 0.1% each. On the other hand, Tata Steel declined 2.3%, Power Grid and Tata Motors both fell 2.1% each. Wipro ended 1.8% down. In the sectoral indices at BSE, all 20 sectors logged losses. Metal sector declined 2.8%, while Realty Index fell 2%. Utilities and energy, both sectors were down 1.7% each. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was negative as shares of 1,221 companies gained while 2,276 fell. Shares of 130 companies remain unchanged. And to discuss the market story, we are joined by stock analyst and expert Avinash Gorakshakar. Avinash, welcome to Market Mantra.
Yeah, good evening.
Avinash, almost 3 trillion rupees wiped out today. And what do you see as the reason? Is it only the FOMC minutes that the market is afraid of?
Yeah, I think one reason is possibly FOMC is going to continue having a hawkish stand. And as earlier they mentioned that, till the time inflation does not come down, it's very much possible that the rate hike cycle is going to continue for at least another, 1 to 2 quarters. So that is point number one, the market was worried. And secondly, I think at a higher level, the market seems to be quite exhausted, on an index level. My sense is that the index did try to make a high above 18,250 to 18,300 levels. But thereafter, there was a lot of selling from the FIs. In fact, even today, FI selling was quite significant. And they have been sellers, for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Domestic institutions, on the other hand, have been buying, in the market quite regularly. But overall, I think if the FI liquidity continues to be on the negative side, and plus with the kind of headwinds we are going to see in the US as well as in Europe, my sense is that the markets are now going to be waiting cautiously for the budget to come in. And even on the budget side, one small comment which I would like to make is that, there are reports that the government is having a kind of a scarcity of funds despite the fact that GST numbers have been better. So I think markets may be a slightly in for a kind of a moderate disappointment, considering that, everybody is expecting this to be an election year budget and possibly some benefits could come in for all classes of people, including middle class and the rural community. So I think markets are now going to be very cautiously awaiting the budget. Until that time, the market on an index level could be very volatile. I think obviously what comes out in the budget will drive the movement in the markets going forward. But net, I think it's going to be a very volatile period, for the coming 1 or 2 weeks. And more importantly, earnings season are going to start from the 9th and 10th of January. So you will see a lot of stock-specific activities based on the Q3 earnings numbers which come out from the company.
You mentioned the budget, Avinash. There's also the factor that a lot of people expect the Fed rate right now is between 4.25 to 4.5 in that range. And they're expected to probably be 2 more 50 basis points increase in the next 2 sessions of the FOMC. So would that would leave the market rate there almost at close to 6% in the US. If that happens, FIIs you mentioned have already taken out almost, I think, $18 billion in the last year. If that happens, does that automatically lead to a lot of further reduction from the Indian markets of FIIs?
So I think one reason is obviously if interest rates continue to go up further, then I think there will be a continuous outflow of FI money from emerging markets like India. But most importantly, how the currency behaves in the very near term is also important. If the rupee continues to remain weak and the dollar appreciates, then I think that is also one factor which is a very important variable, for FI investments in India. The dollar index obviously is a very critical parameter to observe how fast the inflow or outflow of. But net, I think the next 3 to 6 months are going to be pretty challenging because interest rate cycle in the US is unlikely to soften at least in the very near term. So your point is right. We could see a lot of FI outflow at least in the next 3 to 6 months. And these indications are already reflected in the FI numbers as of now, which could possibly get accelerated, if the rate hike cycle continues, relentlessly for at least 1 or 2 quarters.
अविनाश, आज अगर देखा जाए तो कारोबार में बहुत ही दायरा सीमित रहा है और निवेशकों को नो डाउट की इंतजार है फेडरल रिजर्व की बैठक के बाद जो विवरण निकल करके सामने आएंगे। और भी ऐसी कई चीजें देखी जा रही जो मार्केट को लगातार हिट कर रही हैं। आने वाले समय में या इस वीक में अभी जो 2 कारोबारी दिन बचे हुए, कैसा रुख आप देख रहे हैं, कैसा हो सकता है मार्केट का?
देखिए, मार्केट बहुत वोलेटाइल है। हम एक दिन बाजार तेजी में देखते हैं, दूसरे दिन बाजार में बिकवाली आती है। और सबसे बड़ी बात जो मैंने कहा था कि यूएस में अभी भी रिसेशन के फियर्स बहुत बड़े हैं, यूरोप में अभी भी कंडीशंस बहुत खराब है। इनफैक्ट आईएमएफ ने अभी एक रिपोर्ट रिलीज की है, उन्होंने कहा है कि 2023 में मार्केट में बहुत वॉलेटिलिटी आएगी जी, यूरोप और यूएस में दिक्कतें बढ़ेंगी। तो ये अगर ऐसा होता है तो डेफिनेटली मार्केट्स में वॉलेटिलिटी बढ़ने के कारण सस्टेन्ड राइज के लिए थोड़ा सा समय जरूर लगेगा। ऑब्वियसली अगर यूरोप और यूएस में थोड़ी मंदी आती है तो उनका इम्पैक्ट इंडियन कंपनीज पे भी आना चाहिए। तो मेरे ख्याल से इंडेक्स पे एक बहुत छोटे रेंज में मार्केट अभी चलेगा। मैंने जैसे कहा कि अभी तिमाही रिजल्ट का सीजन 9-10 जनवरी से शुरू होगा। मार्केट इन तिमाही रिजल्ट्स को देखेगी, मैनेजमेंट कमेंट्री देखेगी और उसके बाद एक मोटा मोटी अंदाजा मार्केट पे और पॉसिबली कंपनीज पे मार्केट करेगी। तो मेरे ख्याल से नंबर्स अभी आएंगे वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रहेंगे, क्योंकि काफी हद तक जो कंपनीज यूरोप और यूएस को केटर करते हैं, जैसे कि आईटी है, उसमें है, यहाँ पे आपको थोड़ा बहुत एक मैनेजमेंट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से व्यू पॉइंट मिलेगा।
Avinash, if you look at the Indian markets, especially the large caps, they're close to lifetime highs. whereas mid caps and small caps are not quite there. But we always talk of China in terms of negative things like the COVID story there. But China stocks have really been beaten down in 2022. So are Chinese stocks more attractive in terms of valuation vis-a-vis India?
Yeah, I think from a valuation perspective, Chinese stocks would definitely appear to be pretty attractive because, they've been beaten down very badly. But I think the most important factor which would be, important for Chinese stock is how quickly the Chinese economy reopens, how quickly they re-enter the global market. And this is especially true for, sectors like metal, where China is a very big player in the market. So my sense is, it would be clearly a wait and watch policy because COVID reports earlier suggested that China was still facing, COVID cases in a very big way. Thereafter, the government made every possible effort to tell most of the, other kind of countries that things are normal. I think from the 8th of January, all quarantine, restrictions are also completely done away with. So my sense is, it will take a month or two before normalcy comes in. And if at all China does come back in the global markets in a big way, then I think China would be a very big story to watch out for. There's no doubt that if China resumes normalcy, it would definitely help the global sentiment. But at the same time, obviously, it would help specific sectors like metals, which have got a very correlation to what China does in the global.
And Avinash, one final question. You mentioned almost 3 months of volatility. So people who are seeking to invest, should they hold cash or should they buy at dips?
Yeah, I think my guess is that somebody who wants to invest in the equity markets over the longer term should, I think, look at, doing an SIP in stocks or look at, mutual funds typically, which is a much more safer way to invest in Indian equities and where one can generate wealth over the longer term in a very sustained manner. My sense is that stick to a proper SIP plan, stick to a disciplined kind of investment strategy, and I think largely focus on the large cap companies because as you rightly mentioned, mid cap and small cap companies would continue to be extremely volatile. And I think in these kind of markets, it's always better to stick to the larger names, from the Sensex or from the Nifty 50 stock, where I think over the next 3-4 years, a decent kind of risk reward and a good wealth creation strategy can materialize for such investors. But they need to do it diligently and they need to do it consistently. Markets are going to be volatile, but I think they should, apply their investments in a disciplined manner.
Right.
Consistent manner.
Avinash, thank you so much for joining us live on Market Mantra and helping us make sense of the market movements today.
और अब एशियाई बाजार पर नजर डालते हैं। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों में आज महंगाई के मुद्दे पर नरमी और चीन के कड़े कोविड रोधी उपायों की खबरों के चलते सकारात्मक रुख देखा गया। हालांकि शेयर बाजार में आज कारोबार का दायरा सीमित रहा क्योंकि निवेशकों को फेडरल रिजर्व की बैठक के विवरण का इंतजार है। एशियाई शेयर बाजारों में आज मिला जुला रुख देखा गया। हांगकांग का हैंग सेंग सूचकांक 3.2% ऊपर आ गया। दक्षिण कोरिया का कॉस्पी 1.7% की बढ़त में रहा। चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट सूचकांक 0.2% ऊपर आ गया। वहीं दूसरी तरफ जापान का निक्केई सूचकांक आज 1.5% लुढ़क गया। सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम सूचकांक 0.1% नीचे आकर बंद हुआ। विदेशी निवेशकों ने 2022 में एशियाई बाजारों से वर्ष 2008 के वैश्विक वित्तीय संकट के बाद इस बार सर्वाधिक पैसा निकाला है और अमरीकी ब्याज दरों में डॉलर के परिप्रेक्ष्य में वृद्धि को देखते हुए ये निकासी देखी गई है। वहीं यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों की हम बात करें तो अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में यहां पर बढ़त का रुख था। फ्रांस का कैग 1.5% की वृद्धि के साथ कारोबार कर रहा था। जर्मनी का डेक्स 1.2% ऊपर आ गया और लंदन का FTSE 100 0.6% के फायदे में चल रहा था।
The U.S. stocks closed lower yesterday on the first trading day of 2023. Wall Street's main indices fell with the biggest drags from Tesla and Apple, while investors worried about the Federal Reserve's interest rate hiking path as they awaited minutes from its December meeting. The Nasdaq Composite Index declined 0.8% and the S&P 500 fell 0.4%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index ended flat. Jayanto, the question that I was asking Avinash as well is that the Indian markets, especially the large caps, almost as lifetime highs, whereas the Chinese market is also beaten down and the US market is also almost 30-40% off its highs. Of course, we don't talk about investing in Chinese markets right now.
Exactly.
So if one has to choose between the Indian markets and US markets, where do you think it makes more sense?
Well, it all depends on, as Avinash also said, your risk appetite at this point of time, risk reward. And it's a difficult call because we are entering into a very volatile scenario in the next 3 to 6 months for two major reasons. One is recession is very real. And that IMF report which he has quoted is all over where it says that, there will be a downturn. There has been some stray reports from Europe which speaks of the recession which happened in the industrial sector having, reached its trough. So there is a chance it can settle down and reach and climb up from here. But that's not confirmed whether it's across or it's only focused on Germany because the study was taken over Germany. But coming back to a question, I guess even Indian markets at this point of time, be extremely cautious. 60,000 plus levels looks very attractive. I mean, if you remove the 600 point fall today, I mean, it was party time almost in the year end as well as in the New Year's. Now, traditionally, if you look at over the last 5 to 10 years, the first month of a calendar year, in January specifically, there's a lot of volatility which happens because a lot of funds which is coming in, going out, settling down, funds which have closed, again re-entering the market. So it's a volatile month at the end of the day. So that's the first thing. Secondly, budget is there shortly. Now, I think till Feb end, till March, you have headroom to play on your stocks if you're sitting on profits. But once again, if you look back, while you say India is at quite high levels, if you look at the performance of the small caps and the mid caps over the last one calendar year, it's a disastrous performance. It's 1.9% approx or 2% approx in small caps and approximately 3%, 3.5% in mid caps. So your FD is actually giving you better returns at this point of time. So I think that's a cue which we have to take and we have to understand. I mean, it's basically the movement which has happened in large stocks which has kept the momentum in the market in terms of how the Sensex is moving. It's certainly not a broad-based movement across small caps and mid caps, and that's where most of the investors try to put in the money in. Large caps people don't prefer because the swings are not that fast and not happy. So that's an issue which I think we have to focus on. At this point of time, if you have money to invest and if you're looking forward to, try to distribute it. For almost last 1 year, I've said gold. Now gold is paying off its rates because it's gone up to 56,000. In fact, gold has done better than the Sensex if you compare it in the last 1 year. So those are factors which you have to look forward to. Although the movement of gold has only been in the last 6 to 7 weeks or 8 weeks at most. It's not has been a universal movement, but it has performed. So at the end of the day, while stocks sound rosy, for example, the PSU banks as a group, they are giving you returns of 80-90% over the last 6-7 months. But then these are not figures which are there to stay and hold on and sustain, specifically in this year.
और रुपए पर नजर डालें अंतर बैंकिंग मुद्रा बाजार में डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपया आज 8 पैसे मजबूत होकर 82 रुपए 81 पैसे प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स अंतर दिवसीय कारोबार में 0.43% की गिरावट के साथ 104.07 पर कारोबार कर रहा था।
Oil today fell sharply after slumping in the previous session. The crude prices tumbled more than 3% amid concerns about weak demand due to the state of the global economy and China's rising COVID cases. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $79.45 per barrel, while WTI crude was at $74.45 per barrel.
और मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में फरवरी के वायदा कारोबार में सोना 420 रुपए महंगा होकर 55,950 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर था। मार्च अनुबंध वाली चांदी भी 780 रुपए की बढ़त के साथ 70,700 रुपए प्रति किलो पर थी। उधर न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना वृद्धि के साथ $1,864.40 प्रति ऑन्स पर था। चांदी भी बढ़त दर्ज करती हुई $24.55 प्रति ऑन्स पर थी। जयंता, सोने के बारे में अभी आपने थोड़ा सा जिक्र किया था, मैं ये पूछना चाहूंगा आपसे, क्या लोगों को सोने में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए या वेट करना चाहिए, सोना भी और ऊपर जाएगा?
बिल्कुल, मैं मानता हूं कि इस वक्त इस साल खास करके जहां पे वोलेटिलिटी की हम बात कर रहे हैं, तो गोल्ड इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट हेज। तो अगर आप इस दर में भी प्रवेश करना चाहते हैं तो बेशक आपका 5 से 10% पोर्टफोलियो सोना में अगर हो, इसमें कोई नुकसान नहीं।
And also oil, has the Europe and US navigated the winter well, because there was this huge fear that the Russian thing would probably cause a huge spike, but they seem to have navigated it well so far.
It's not a scare or a fear in the horizon, or neither it's there in the doorstep.
So where do you think it will settle? 75, 80?
I think it can settle much more below that. If the recession actually picks up of some momentum. Recession is real. The only thing is we are not able to see it because it will take time to come to our shores or even to the European shores in that manner.
It's so bad. We are hoping for a recession in Europe. And what about gold? You mentioned that gold is something you're still bullish about.
Yes, I'm still bullish about, and it's an important hedge, specifically in this foreign market.
And about silver? Do you think silver is better than gold or no?
It's a difficult call to take, but as I said, Indian investors would always prefer much more investing in gold rather than silver at this point of time.
जयंता, इस कार्यक्रम में शामिल होने के लिए और हमसे चर्चा करने के लिए आपका हम बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करते हैं।
Thank you, Jayanto, for joining us live in the studio. Before we close, a reminder of the headlines that we covered. Government approves National Green Hydrogen Mission with an initial outlay of 19,744 crore rupees. Domestic share indices log losses of more than 1%. Sensex finishes below the 60,700 level. Nifty settles below 18,050. Gold climbs to trade around 56,000 rupees per 10 grams for February contracts at MCX, and Brent crude plunges more than 3%. That's all that we have in this edition of Market Mantra. Namaskar.
Market Mantra. Market Mantra.